Is there any one thing that you wish you hadn't cut in the past?
About a million things. About a million things that we've done which we didn't want to cut, which were just wonderful finds and things like that, and people and rooms. But
We saw Drew Pritchard on TV, turning forgotten treasures into history. But behind his success lay a tragedy that left him broken. How did a man who seemed unstoppable face such heartache? This is the untold story of Drew's most painful chapter yet. The road always started in the quiet. Before the first handshake and before the first haggle, there was a breath, a small private promise to find beauty in what the world had called done. He would look at a barn door, a factory light, a church pew with scuffed knees, and he would see something that could outlast fashion. That was the magic he sold, and it is still the magic people watch for. The alchemy of rescuing history and giving it a second life on a better stage. He did not invent the hunt, but he turned it into a kind of poetry. The van door slides open. The air smells like wet timber, cold iron and dust that has learned patience. Somewhere in the back of a shed, a fragment of a story waits to be told again. He moves through these spaces with a reverence that looks like greed to the untrained eye, the way a doctor might look greedy for touching every pulse. The truth is simpler. He wants the past to breathe. On television, it looked effortless. Drive, discover, negotiate, restore, resell. The edit makes a dance out of travel and toil, but even the best edits cannot shave down the weight of years spent in the cold, in the mud, in rooms where the only light is a skylight that leaks when it rains. You can love this work and be broken by it at the same time. That is the first secret of his story, the first quiet crack in the mirror. Salvage hunters arrived like a friendly knock on Britain's back door. It began in 2011, small and hungry, a simple premise wrapped around a stubborn heart. An antiques dealer would cross the country to find the pieces others missed, then coax them back to usefulness and grace for customers who wanted history without the cobwebs. The show found a home and an audience that understood the difference between old and valuable, and why those two words are only cousins in the right hands. Over the years, the series kept going, season after season, until it became a fixture, a reliable companion for people who like their television with the smell of sawdust still on it. As of 2025, the program remains on air, proof that the appetite for honest work and honest objects is not a trend, it is a temperament. You rarely make a road like that alone. For more than a decade, viewers rode shotgun with a friend known simply as T, the kind of partner who could turn a heavy lift into a joke and a tight space into a plan. The show changed over time, as shows do. Longtime companions moved on, and new faces arrived. Other dealers with their own eyes and markets, like Vicky Knott and Alistair Dryburgh, who brought fresh instincts to a hunt that never repeats itself. The chemistry shifted, but the mission did not. The goal was still to find what was good and bring it home in one piece. There is glory in the find and the fix. A light fitting with a better future. A workbench with another generation left in it. A stained glass panel returning to a window after a life in a crate. But the glory is brief. The road is long. The joke that kept the crew warm is not a cure for the kind of tiredness that lives in bone. This is where the heartbreak shows itself, not as a single headline, but as the steady accumulation of cost. In public, the story is bright. On paper, the curriculum is impressive. The show is a success. The dealer is a name. The clients include the kind of people whose names look good on a page. Among them are big international brands and celebrated chefs who trust his taste when they want rooms to speak in a certain accent, the old world made fresh. The audience numbers stretch across countries because the language of rescue is universal. But the heart does not count like that. It counts in quiet rooms and empty chairs. If you trace the line backward, you end up at a workbench. Before television, before fame, he learned to read light and lead in color in the old art of stained glass. He learned to take apart what was damaged without wrecking what still held, then to put it back together with the kind of care that makes a repair invisible to everyone except the one who did it. He cleared churches, not the soul, just the things that souls wore down through the years, kneelers and pews, rails and panels, 1,000 pieces rescued from 1,000 quiet endings. Those early days were the foundation on which the television years were built. They taught him the difference between looking and seeing, between the value the market sets and the value a life sets. Success arrived, and it did what success always does. It offered everything and asked for everything in return. He opened a shop in a medieval town that seems designed to keep old stories alive. The shop did well, crowds came, and the bell over the door became a kind of heartbeat for a while. Then the rhythm changed. In May 2022, after years of buying, restoring, and selling from that address, the Conway store closed. The premises did not stay empty. A local group took it on and filled it with bread and coffee and the chatter that shops are supposed to hold. Life moved into the space as if to say, there are many ways to keep a town's heart beating. After closing the Conway store, he opened a new antiques shop elsewhere, a second act written without apology for what came before. There is a practical reason people sell their own treasures. Sometimes it is money, sometimes it is space, sometimes it is the need to draw a line between a version of yourself that no longer fits and the one you are growing into. In early 2023, he put a collection under the hammer, pieces from a life spent rescuing and reimagining, and the sale told a story words rarely can. The following year, in March 2024, more items from his private trove found new homes. People who loved the show, and the man bought pieces that once lived in his rooms. An odd, tender transaction that felt like a handshake with a stranger in the same club. During this same stretch, home life changed shape. The long marriage that began before the show and ran alongside its rise ended in 2017. It was a private loss made public by the nature of the work. The separation did not end the professional respect. On screen, the partnership continued. The analysis and the valuations still offered, with the steady tone of someone who knows what matters in an object and in a day. Fans saw two people keep faith with the work that introduced them, a rare kind of grace in a business that tends to eat its own when the lights get hot. There were other public bumps, the kind that stick to your name even after they pass, like burrs on a bootlace. For a time, he found himself barred from the pubs in his hometown, a sentence that made headlines, then ended, leaving him to carry on in a place where everyone knows everyone. And forgiveness is a practice, not a performance. The restriction was lifted. Life resumed. The town remained itself, a place that holds memory without letting it rule the day. You can measure heartbreak in large numbers, and you can measure it in small ones. In August of 2019, a small life ended and took a big piece of joy with it. The little dog who padded through episodes and shops and social media with terrifying certainty died, and thousands of people who had never met him said goodbye. It sounds trivial to those who do not keep small hearts in their homes, but grief has its own arithmetic. Sometimes a dog holds the thread of a life together during the years when people come and go. When that thread breaks, a silence moves in that only time can soften. If the first act was The Apprentice and the second act was The Hunt, then the third act looked a lot like Renewal. He sold the chapel house that had held his family and his gatherings. He let go of a fleet of classic cars that had felt like a chapter heading once, and now felt like a weight. He moved into a place more suited to a smaller life, then later bought a townhouse far from the hills that raised him, a Georgian project waiting for patient hands to unpick 100 shortcuts and restore the proportions that time and tenants had once ignored. He did the work as he always has, piece by piece, line by line, with an eye that loves things back to themselves. The show kept rolling because the show is a machine that runs on curiosity and travel. New series aired with small and large changes because the business changes and the format breathes. Other dealers joined him on the road, and each brought a new market and a new way of looking at a piece. Audiences adjusted the way audiences do, open to the next find and the next restoration, because the heart of the program was the same even as the voices around the table shifted. The hours in a van stayed long, and the joy of finding the right thing in the wrong place stayed real. He learned to speak about the cost without turning it into spectacle. Not a confession, not a plea for pity, just a plain account of days when the edges went soft, and a man had to choose sleep over one more negotiation. He gave interviews that were less about sparkle and more about the truth antique dealers know by heart, that the trade can consume you if you do not keep it on a leash. He wrote a book in 2023 that read like a toolbox with the lid off, practical and honest, a reminder that a career built on old things can still teach new lessons if you are willing to write them down. When you watch him walk into a warehouse, you see a man looking for a story he can carry. He listens for the creak in the floor that tells him where weight always sits. He reads paint the way a botanist reads leaves. He touches edges because edges tell the truth that faces sometimes hide. If he smiles, it is usually because a detail has confirmed what his eye already suspected. If he frowns, it is because a detail is lying. There is very little romance in the process. There is a great deal of love. The heartbreak in this story is ordinary, which is why it hurts more. It is a marriage that ends when the world is watching. It is a public stumble turned into a headline and then into a lesson. It is a shop that closes after years of service to a town that gave it color. It is a small dog's death that lasts a day. It is the daily cost of saying yes to travel and lifting and endless evaluation. It is finding the line between a life and a life's work, then redrawing it when the old line stops working. And yet the man is not a tragedy. He is a salvager by nature. That word is not just a job, it is a survival strategy. When something breaks, he sets it on the bench and asks what can be saved. When a chapter ends, he does not burn the book. He moves to a new page and lets the margin hold what it must. He starts again, and he says so, plainly, with the kind of clarity that makes other people braver about beginning again themselves. The new work looks a lot like the old work, just cleaner around the edges. The buys are still buys, the restores still restores, the sales still sales. The difference is in the pace and in the boundaries. He can say no now without apologizing to the television in his head that demands constant motion. He can say yes to smaller rooms and longer conversations that do not need cameras. He can point the spotlight at someone else and take a half step back so a new voice can be heard. This is what maturity looks like when you love a trade. It is not a retreat. It is rebalancing. There are moments when the past taps on the window and asks to come in for a minute. Old friends from early seasons, old sellers with new stock, old roads that remember the van's wait before the sat-nav knew their names. He returns to those places with gratitude and with a softness that comes after a storm. He looks older because he is. The audience looks older because they are. This is a kind of fellowship. It acknowledges time without giving it the last word. In 2024, a small notice told a big story. Another sale from his personal stores. Another letting go, in public, of things that had kept him company in private. The objects moved on, as objects must. The man stayed, lighter and a little more free to write the next chapter without the old chapters crowding the shelf. People came to those sales not just to buy, but to participate in a ritual that anyone who keeps a house knows by heart. You release what no longer serves, and you bless it on its way. If you ask why people care, the answer is not complicated. He has shown them a version of themselves they like to believe is true. Thrifty, discerning, respectful of the past without being trapped by it. He has shown them that heavy things can be lifted if you know how to lean. He has shown them that rare does not always mean fragile, and that common does not always mean cheap. He has reminded them that the best part of a deal is the part where both people walk away, smiling, pockets fuller, and hearts steadier. There is one more sorrow in this file, the kind that rarely earns headlines because it is both private and common. Starting over is not a decision you make in a single day. It is a series of small choices you make while nobody is watching. It is selling a car you loved because it represents a season you are finished with. It is restoring a room because you want your life to sound different when you walk across it. It is reaching out to the people who kept their hands under your shoulders when the floor tilted, and telling them thank you in the simple grammar of time spent together. The show goes on, and it should. It is not the villain in this story. It is the stage on which a craftsman has done his work for years. An honest chorus of hunts and restorations that never loses its charm for those who love to see a thing rescued at the last minute. The dealer goes on, and he should. He is better when he is busy, better when he is reading surfaces and telling the truth about proportion and patina. The heartbreak goes on, and it should in the way that all heartbreak goes on, not as a wound that refuses to heal, but as a seam that holds two halves together after the split. Somewhere right now, there is a light fitting that needs rewiring and a paint layer that needs testing with a careful thumbnail. Somewhere, there is a shop bell ringing without fuss. Somewhere, he is on the road again, not because he cannot sit still, but because the country is a museum with no closing time and the curator is still in love with the job. There was a morning when the van door felt heavier than usual. It was not the hinge or the cold. It was him. The night before had been the kind of turnpike night that eats patience and leaves crumbs of irritation in the footwell. Coffee had disguised the fatigue just enough to get him home. It could not disguise the way his lower back argued when he tried to lift a cast-iron base that had waited 50 years for a second chance. He braced, lifted, and the old ache sharpened into a new voice. He set the thing down and stood there a long time, hands on hips, breathing as if breath were a plan. That was the day he started admitting that even love needs limits. He has never been a martyr. He does not tell the story that way. He prefers the plainer version. There are jobs you cannot do alone, no matter how experienced your hands or how stubborn your pride is. He learned to ask. He learned to wait. He learned to call for a trolley instead of a miracle. These changes seem small from the outside. They are not small when your trade has taught you to make speed look like skill. Slowing down is a new skill. It is a new kind of courage. When the Conway shop closed, it did not feel like defeat. It felt like taking off a coat that had kept him warm for years and now fit too tightly in the shoulders. Still, there were moments the cameras never saw that could break a steady heart. One last day with the bell over the door, the way its ring hung in the empty space like an echo of all the conversations it had counted. One last sweep of the stone floor, dusty lines writing the outline of cabinets and counters that had once lived there. One last turn of the key. He handed it over and walked away, making himself look straight ahead because looking back would have been too much. The crew felt it too. You cannot build a shop without building a family of sorts. There are the people who invoice and pack and lift and polish, but there are also the others, the ones who never appear on any list. The man who drops off sandwiches because he remembers when you bought his mother's kitchen table. The kid who stares through the window at the naval light because it looks like it came from a ship that sailed straight out of his imagination. The couple who brings flowers on a Saturday because they saw a sale and wanted to say, "Well done." Closing a door like that means teaching yourself to love a town in a new way. He learned to love his town by becoming a better neighbor, less vanishing, more visible in the ordinary ways that do not make good television. He bought a loaf and chatted about the weather and glass. He showed up at a charity sale and spent a half hour straightening a row of chairs because it felt wrong to leave them crooked. He stood aside so someone else could have the last word in a conversation that used to end with him. He waved across the street and meant it. He let the place be small again, and in that smallness it grew more dear. The hunt changed too. He has always been good at listening to objects. It sounds sentimental until you watch him do it. He runs a hand along a timber and can tell you where a carpenter lost patience and where he found it again. He looks at the way rust has eaten into a hinge and can tell you whether the door was left open to a sea wind or closed in a damp room with bad ventilation. That listening now includes people in a way it did not always. He waits out the enthusiastic seller, hears the story under the sales pitch, and buys not because he needs to fill a van, but because the piece will live well where he plans to send it. There was a house clearance that tested all of that. A grand old place that had been grand for so long, it forgot how to be anything else. The family had gone soft at the edges, as grand families sometimes do, but the house had not. It had held on through every repaint and rewire. He walked room to room and felt the history press friendly fingers into his shoulder. He bought less than he could have. He bought only what he promised he would love. That is a vow he has added in recent years. It does not always make for the best margin. It does make for better sleep. The sales from his own collection were part business and part ceremony. He stood at the back of a room and watched other people fall in love with the same things that had once made his heart stumble. A pair of lights that had hung over his own table for a decade went up and then down under another roof, and he felt a pang that was not quite sorrow and not quite relief. These events can be noisy, theatrical, full of hands. Somewhere inside the noise, there is a quiet exchange, a promise that the object will continue to be cared for, that it will continue to carry the story of the eyes that saw it and the hands that lifted it. The townhouse became a private syllabus in patience, floors that had learned to slant with dignity, plaster that remembered 5 different decorators and forgave them all, doorways tightened by paint, and quick repairs that needed to be undone in the right order to loosen again. He found pencil marks behind skirting that recorded heights and names, and he left them, a small museum hidden in the house, because the past should not be erased just to make a present look tidy. A house like that forces a person to slow down. He did. He found he liked the speed of careful work. Work on camera remained work of a different kind. The rhythm of travel, the problem of light and time, the art of compressing something complex into the shape of a scene that still feels honest. He began to mentor on camera without calling it that. He would hand a piece to a younger dealer and make a point of going quiet while they thought, even if silence is awkward for a microphone. He would ask a question and not rescue the answer. He would point to a detail and then step aside so someone else could discover the next one. You can tell when someone is teaching because they want to be applauded for knowing. You can tell when someone is teaching because they want you to know. He had moved from the first to the second. The heartbreak that runs through this story does not sharpen into scandal. It settles into the ordinary pain of a life repotted. He still misses the old dog in a way that catches him off guard. He still reaches in the dark to the wrong side of a bed sometimes. He still hears a certain bell and thinks of the shop without meaning to. He still holds a friend's silence and knows exactly where the seam is that holds it together. These are not the kinds of losses that destroy a man. They are the kinds that make him careful. Careful, not timid. He still loves a risk if it is the right kind. He will still buy a piece most dealers would walk past if the proportions are honest and the future is clear. He will still tell a seller no, and then yes, if the math shifts in a way that makes sense to both of them. He will still show up in places no one expects him to be because he heard a rumor about a factory light under a tarp in a yard that has not been tidy since the war. The thrill remains. It simply shares space with respect for limits. He learned that a camera is a magnifying glass that can heat as well as reveal. He was recognized on long days when he wanted to be invisible, and he smiled anyway because courtesy is a habit he refuses to break. Now and then, he drew a line and stepped behind it, even if that meant disappointing a stranger. He apologized and then did not make a second apology to himself. You can let a public in without giving them everything. This lesson came late and cost something. It was worth the cost. You will hear him speak more plainly now about the unglamorous parts of the trade, the tax of travel, the anxiety of warehouses where everything feels like a maybe, the drag on your mood when a good piece dies under bad restoration or careless packing, the relentlessness of negotiation when you wake up with nothing left to bargain with. He does not dress these confessions in caution. He offers them to people who dream of a life in antiques because they deserve honesty. He offers them to people who will never sit in a cold shed identifying timber by the sound of a knock, because they deserve to know what makes their homes feel quietly rich. There is a scene that explains him better than the biography. A seller brings out a chair that has lost a leg and gained 3 lifetimes of polish and scuff. It is a mess by any sensible measure. He does not measure sensibly in the usual way. He tilts the chair and studies where the leg tore away, sees the grain and the splinters like a map of what went wrong. Then he finds the old repair, the one that was almost held, and he nods, as if to say, "I see you." He pays less than the seller hoped, but more than the piece deserves, and he carries it away with the gentleness reserved for the wounded. Weeks later, it comes back into a room that needed it, and becomes a place where a child learns to read. This is salvage, not just the thing, but the life that gathers around it after you say yes. He is not a preacher. He is not even particularly sentimental in person. He laughs at himself often, and he laughs at the trade when it gets too grand about the very ordinary business of buying and selling. He can be sharp, as many good dealers are. He does not pretend otherwise. What has changed is where the sharpness aims. He is quicker to turn it toward nonsense and quicker to turn patience toward people. That might be the cleanest way to measure his new life. It would be dishonest to say every headline has softened. In any career lived in front of a camera, there are pockets of noise that keep echoing long after the sound stops. He lets them echo somewhere he does not go every day. He has work to do. He has dealers to call. He has a list of pieces to find that will make someone's room feel like it has always been waiting for them. He has a life to live with fewer detours and more benches where a friend can sit and talk without the clock becoming a third voice in the room. The show will eventually end. All shows do. That is not a tragedy. That is a closing night well earned. Between now and then, there are still roads his van knows by habit, and new roads that will test its patience. There are still warehouses where a single bracket, thrown under a table, turns out to be the start of a pair that completes a room. There are still tiny churches with windows packed away in crates, waiting for a hand to lift them into air and light. Slowly, slowly, and then again more slowly, because glass remembers every touch and every mistake. If you want to know what the heartbreaking tragedy of Drew Pritchard is, say it straight. It is not one event. It is a life priced by effort that for a long time forgot to budget for the man who was spending it. It is a collection of partings, some chosen and some not, that left a quieter house and a clearer mind. It is the moment a craftsman looks at his own calendar the way he looks at a warped tabletop and says, "This needs attending." It is the tenderness of walking back into the trade with gentler feet and finding that the path still fits. These stories matter because they tell us how to live with our own breakage. Most of us are not dealers. We are not on camera. We do not drive long miles to talk someone into parting with a factory sign that deserves a better century. But all of us know what it is to carry too much for too long. All of us know what it is to learn the weight you can bear and the weight you must set down. His story gives us a map, not to fame or to antiques or to television, but to the simple business of rescuing what is worth keeping and blessing what is not as it leaves. He learned to end a day before the day ends. He learned to begin a job without turning it into a performance. He learned to leave a room without needing to leave an impression. He learned to stay long enough to hear the story in a voice that is not his. This learning did not arrive with applause. It arrived with practice. It arrived in the loss of a dog, the closing of a door, the weight of a van registration that said the year out loud in numbers that refused to lie. It arrived the way most wisdom does, slowly enough that you cannot show it to anyone until it has already changed you. He still walks toward a shed with a grin when he suspects there is something in it worth saving. He still feels the same shift inside when he pulls back a tarp and sees a shape that feels like a good sentence. He still shakes a seller's hand and feels the kind of satisfaction that never required an audience. He still takes a risk now and then that would make his younger self proud and a little nervous. He still goes home and eats at a table that has been carefully chosen to make ordinary food taste like more. He still sleeps under a roof that remembers the hands that built it. He still wakes prepared to do it all again, but not at any cost. For watchful viewers, the lesson is clear. The value has never only been in the object. It has been in the eye that sees it, in the hand that carries it, in the room that receives it, and finally, in the life that gathers around it. The heartbreak is that it took so long to say that value out loud about himself. The grace is that he has started saying it, and the story is better for it. In the end, there is a van and a road and a map with coffee rings for compass roses. There is a town that grew up with him, sometimes impatiently, sometimes forgivingly, always particularly itself. There is a trade that rescued him as often as he rescued it. There is a man who knows what to keep and what to let go. If you listen closely, you will hear him breathe before he lifts, and that breath will tell you everything you need to know about how to go on. Subscribe to uncover the truth behind Drew Pritchard's heartbreaking tragedy. Like and share to spread the word about the struggles he's faced beyond the fame and success we all saw.